Welcome to Secrets of the Past and our countdown of the 10 largest empires in history. Number 10. The Xiongnu Empire. The Xiongnu Empire was founded by nomads from the eastern Eurasian steppe. The empire was founded in the early 3rd century BC by a man named Modu Xiongnu and was centered in the territory that would later become the domain of the Mongols. The Xiongnu Empire's territory spanned 9 million kilometers squared and stretched from the Manchurian region of modern-day China to the eastern border of Central Asia at its peak in the late 2nd century BC. Number 9. The Yuan Dynasty. As the vast Mongol Empire broke up into separate empires in the mid to late 13th century, the Yuan Dynasty rose to rule China. It ruled over all modern-day China, as well as Mongolia and the Korean Peninsula, covering an area of 11 million square kilometers. However, its power began to wane in the mid-14th century, and it was eventually replaced by the Qing Dynasty. Number 8. The Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyad Caliphate was the second caliphate following the time of the Prophet Muhammad. It succeeded the Rashidun Caliphate in the mid-7th century and lasted until the Abbasids overthrew it in the mid-8th century. The Umayyad Caliphate ruled over roughly the same area as the Abbasids. The dynasty already controlled present-day Iran, the Caucasus, the Fertile Crescent, the Arabian Peninsula and Egypt at the time of its founding, but it went on to conquer a large swath of land in coastal northern Africa, reaching as far as the northern coast of modern-day Morocco. At its greatest extent, it covered over 11.1 million square kilometers. Number 7. The Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate was the third Islamic caliphate to succeed Islam's founder, the Prophet Muhammad. When the Abbasids defeated the preceding Umayyad Caliphate in the mid-8th century, the caliphate arose. Islam's golden age began under the leadership of the Abbasid Caliphate. Its territory spanned 11.1 million square kilometers, stretching from the western boundary of India in the east to the coast of Africa in what is now Algeria in the west. Number 6. The Second French Colonial Empire. Following the First French Colonial Empire, the Second French Colonial Empire began in the early to mid-19th century. France, like the United Kingdom, previously had a large number of colonies spread all over the globe. The majority of France's holdings were in Africa, with lesser colonies in the Americas, the Caribbean and the South Pacific. France's Second Colonial Empire extended 11.5 million square kilometers at its peak in the early 20th century. The northern African countries of Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia, as well as the majority of what is now Western Africa, were once French colonies. Number 5. The Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire was a massive colonial power that spanned much of North and South America, the Caribbean and several smaller countries. It began shortly after the Iberian Peninsula's realms of Castile and Aragon unified in the late 15th century and finished with the Reconquista, which was the retaking of the peninsula from the Muslims. Spanish territory in North and South America, the Caribbean, Africa and Asia spanned 13.7 million square kilometers at its peak in the early 19th century. Mexico, Central America's countries and the majority of South America's current nation-states are all former Spanish colonies. Number 4. The Qing Dynasty. From the mid-17th century until the early 20th century, China was ruled by the Qing Empire, an imperial dynasty. It was the final imperial dynasty in Chinese history before the country became a republic. The Qing dynasty had Manchurian origins, which is why it is frequently referred to as the Manchu dynasty. Manchuria is currently part of northeast China. After defeating the preceding Ming dynasty in the 17th century, the Manchus invaded China and established the Qing dynasty. The Qing Empire spanned 14.7 million square kilometers at its peak in the late 18th century. Number 3. The Russian Empire. The Russian Empire began as the Principality of Moscow, which included the land that surrounds today's Russian capital. Tsar Ivan IV initiated an expansion push in the mid-16th century. By the mid-17th century, the Russian Empire had reached the Bering Sea's coastlines, which today are part of the United States of America's state of Alaska. Alaska did in fact once belong to the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire had grown to include territories in the Caucasus and Central Asia by the late 19th century. The empire's borders spanned from Asia's northern shore to present-day borders of Afghanistan and Iran, and from the Bering Sea in the east to Germany's eastern border in the west, encompassing a total area of 22.8 million square kilometers. Much of the old Russian Empire's territory is still held by the Russian Federation today. However, parts of Central Asia, the Caucasus and Eastern Europe are now independent or part of other countries. Number 2. The Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire in history, spanned both Asia and Europe, controlling almost all of Asia. The empire began in the early 13th century with the uniting of Mongol tribes under Genghis Khan's leadership. Within a half century, the empire had a considerable portion of Eastern Europe, the majority of Central Asia, and the majority of China under its authority. The Mongol Empire's borders stretched from the Sea of Japan to Western Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, at its peak in the mid to late 13th century, spanning an area of 24 million square kilometers. Number 1. The British Empire. The British Empire was the world's largest empire in history. The early 17th century saw the beginning of Britain's imperial expansion. The British Empire controlled 35.5 million square kilometres of land at its peak in 1920. Because the British Empire had colonies all over the world, people used to remark, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." With the most powerful navy in the world, it ruled the waves, until being surpassed by the United States during World War II. Following that war, a bankrupt Great Britain discovered that sustaining and defending an empire was too costly. Britain's status as a worldwide power deteriorated and its empire dwindled. Today, the Commonwealth of Nations contains the remnants of the British Empire. And that brings us to the end of our rundown of the top 10 largest empires in history. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.